Great, and I'm over to Alastair for our last session for lunch, and we'll see you after lunch at 2:30.
So, hi there everybody. Welcome along to our Artificial Intelligence discussions group. I'm delighted to say we have today three very impressive organisations. We've worked with all three of them. So we've got Stephen from UKCPI on my far left. We have Tim from Cambridge Design Partnership. And we've got Tautvydas here from TestLabs in Peterborough. So today we're going to kind of talk about artificial intelligence in the medical device sector. And to get started with, if we start with you, Tim, and we've got the topic of knowledge management. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. So we develop products and services for our clients with our outsourced R&D, and therefore we work with a lot of R&D outfits. And actually what we're finding with AI, and particularly around the generative AI, is the ability to access knowledge in a way that was just not there before. Mm-hmm. And I think very much the large language models have done two things, and I think the second one was just happen chance. The first focus was just to get a language that it could converse, it could discuss. And the second thing is it somehow encapsulates knowledge. And I think that's been the sort of it was a secondary thing, and that's why it's actually quite hard to get right. And therefore it sometimes will hallucinate and it will sometimes get things wrong. But actually using AI for knowledge management, I think is really, really powerful. Okay. And I think the key for us in what we're doing is how do you engage the real human experts and complement them rather than replace them? Sure. Because the knowledge management is so capable, it's really taking us forward really fast, but you still need to find a way of engaging with the experts out there to add that true value.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and I think there was one point, knowledge, does it equal expert?
Well, so that was yes, that was the point really. I think is that these systems will generate things very, very fast. It'll be really powerful. It'll be really capable, and it'll appear to say things really beautifully, but it'll say the wrong things really beautifully. But actually, even when it's starting to be accurate, it's not necessarily being complete. And providing room for experts, I think, is really key for us. So one of the things we're doing is providing tools where we will extend our own expertise and we'll give them the tools to become more expert. Sure. And I think that, for me, that balance of human and machine is really, really powerful.
Sure. Oh, great, thanks. And Steve, if we come over to you, then sort of areas of healthcare that you're involved with, working in AI at the moment, and where do you see things going, and what things are working very well might be another question.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Steve Bagshaw. I work for a company called CPI, pretty cool organisation in terms of helping clients in medtech scale up from concept, from research through to commercialisation. I've never seen so many people packed into a small room as well, by the way. Aside from that, in terms of the now, so maybe I'm stating the obvious, but there's something what people term shift left technology. So what that means is that medtech and healthcare is becoming more digitised, and AI is obviously a part of that. And what's driving that? Can people remember the term online banking? I presume so. Now it's just known as banking. So what we're seeing, particularly in the healthcare sector and the innovators that we engage with, any digital technologies which free up time or speed efficiency and allow clinicians to provide more time for empathetic care, that's where you would generally see the innovation. So things like image analysis, anomaly detection in radiology, cancer detection, those sorts of things, patient flow and discharge, so speeding up those process and bottlenecks, developing medical records, anything that can be digitized and free up more time for empathetic care, I think is probably where they're now. In terms of the future, and this is quite early stage research, but things around personalized healthcare, so the drive towards personalized or individual healthcare. And what I mean by that is there's concepts such as virtual twins or digital twins. Are people aware of digital twins? Yeah. So the concept actually started by NASA for the Apollo mission, so trying to create a digital environment for what it's like in space, and that's starting to move more and more towards healthcare. So people might be familiar with programs where people are creating digital twins for organs or biological systems or manufacturing lines. I suppose what I'm saying is the more and more data that's being provided on a person, so whether that's genetic data or whether that's your environment data, doctors and clinicians are getting more and more data, and the more data you can understand and utilise, the more personalised care that you can provide. So people are creating digital twins for organs, and medical device companies are testing their devices, how they might impact the heart through a digital twin, for instance. So I think that's an area which has grown in the future. In the current, it's about efficiency and saving time. I think in the future, it'll be around personalisation and individualised healthcare.
Okay, great, thanks. So, Tautvydas, we'll come to you because unlike Tim and Steve, you're in a slightly different area.
That's correct,
so in terms of being a test lab, how do you see AI supporting your activities?
That's correct. So at TestLabs, we support medical device manufacturers in getting their market access. So we do medical device testing and validation. And if you look at the market, medical device market is forecasted to grow 4% each year up in 2030. Medical device testing and validation market is supposed to grow 9% each year. And I think it does about 1% of the whole total market. That adds a lot of pressure for laboratories globally to meet that demand. And the capacity is already outstripped. Like, there's more medical devices being pushed through the cogs than medical device laboratories can push through. So we're looking at different options to see how can we provide better, more reliable service using machine learning to see whether we can shorten the process time. And when we talk to our clients, medical device manufacturers, if there's one problem they're trying to fix, is to try and shorten the time they can get their products to the market. So R&D, regulatory roadmap, testing and validation, and seeing their products in the market. So as a lab, we're trying to say how can we create methods and processes to make sure that we can achieve those targets. And AI potentially will play a big part of that.
Okay, great. And I suppose if you're talking about artificial intelligence, and one thing that came to mind was we do a lot of work as a consultancy on human factors. And one aspect of human factors is function analysis. What things can a human do better than a machine? There must be things, particularly in all three areas, whereby you can take away the repetitive task, and artificial intelligence can then improve the activity by removing these repetitive tasks, but maybe not being as intuitive as a human being, but that will change. But are there things that you could see being accelerated by the use of artificial intelligence?
So I think practically speaking, what we do in a lab, it's very labor intensive. So you still have analysts doing the work, producing data, analyzing the data. And we know that machine learning models, they work on a lot of data to try and do the interpretation. So at the moment, we're coming up with that data. But where we see where AI can help is with the regulatory roadmaps, with understanding and matching the right testing standards, and even working on methods of testing their products to make sure they get the right outcomes. Because that's also very labor intensive. You have to read a lot, interpret a lot, and understand a lot to make sure you get there. So there's aspects where we can definitely see language models and machine learning processes that can help with that. But ultimately, when it comes to testing and providing real factual results, AI at the moment can't do that what humans can do at this stage.
Yeah. Okay. Then if we come back to you, Tim, then the subject of language models. So for anyone who's not familiar with language models, could you give us a little introduction and then...
Yeah, so it goes back to some of the earlier points I was making, I think. The language models they're pure statistics. They're just maths, ultimately. It's not magic. It does feel like magic sometimes. It does feel insane. But it's just pure statistics. And one of the things I like about language models is they're now working out how to work out whether a human or a machine wrote that piece of text. And it turns out there's a perplexity score.
Yeah.
Perplexity is basically how different is that piece of text from what a machine would have written. So basically, it's a statistical analysis. If you're statistically not very good, you're likely to be a human. And so to err is to be human, I think, right now. So one of the things that I think these large language models are doing is providing an interface, a way of interacting with a machine that is very, very human-like. And I think what has been really interesting is that robotics went after the blue-collar workers. Generative AI is absolutely going after the knowledge workers. So all of us up here are massively challenged by that. We're a consultancy. What does that mean for our productivity growth over the next 2 to 3 years? Is it 5%? Is it 20%? Is it 95%? I don't think we really know. And I think one of the things that all we can do in organisations like ourselves is we have to maximise our productivity because unless we do that, other people will be doing it. So the opportunities, I think, with these large language models are huge because we're able to converse with the machine in a way that we could never do that before.
Just a kind of a sideline question then. I mean, obviously algorithms for artificial intelligence are generally very complex things. Do you feel there's enough exposure to the wider audience on what algorithms are and how they actually work?
Gosh, so I mean, ultimately, it's all maths, isn't it?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're not very good. You're either good at the arts or you're good at the sciences.
Yeah.
And in the UK, we're not very good at actually allowing you to be good at both.
Right.
And I think we should be doing that. Scientists, I did double maths physics for goodness sake. We should be forced to do more of the arts, and similarly the other way around. So I think our general education will need to include an understanding of what the maths is all about.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be really important. But I think one of the things we are seeing, the FDA, for example, is allowing AI as a medical device. That's beginning to be a conversation. And they're still focused on locking the algorithm down.
Yeah.
So it's not a continuous learning exercise.
Yeah.
It is a pre-proved model that's been pre-tested, goes through all the tests, goes through all the validation, and then gets locked. And I think the large language models, I think, have a challenge for that approach, because health is a service, not a device.
Yeah.
And if we continually treat the potential for the health service to be regulated as a device, I think we will cut out a lot of potential innovation.
Sure.
So for us, actually really understanding the maths behind it and actually what it means for the nature of what we can offer is a really interesting dynamic. And I'm not quite sure that conversation's there yet.
Yeah, because I mean, as an engineer, you're very interested in supervised and unsupervised algorithms, but when you actually look at what's posted around artificial intelligence at the moment, there's not much about what's under the bonnet. It's far more about using artificial intelligence, but maybe that's an engineer's biased point of view, I don't know. So back to you, Steve, then, challenges for innovators. So do you see a conflict there between innovators and artificial intelligence? Is there a clash potentially there?
I think the first point, AI is just one of the challenges. If you're looking to, so CPI works with a lot of innovators, so we get to get visibility of some of the challenges, and AI is just one particular challenge. If you're developing a device and it's not providing health economic benefit or it's not addressing a clinical need, then you can have whatever AI or algorithm, it's not going to be adopted. So I think the first point is there's multiple multidisciplinary challenges for an innovator getting a medical device to market, whether that's from a regulatory perspective, whether that's from a health economic perspective, whether that's usability and design, a patient-centered approach, et cetera, et cetera. So there's many different challenges. In terms of AI and the digital health landscape, so we worked with a really good organisation called CDP, which Tim and his colleagues work for. So we looked at around 50 to 60 stakeholders in the UK around digital health and some of the challenges which they saw for adoption. Two of the main challenges was around evidence generation. So you'll see a kind of catch-22 between innovators trying to generate evidence, whether that's clinical and health economic evidence, and clinicians wanting to see health economic or clinical evidence to trial something. So that's a key challenge. And then the second one's interoperability into healthcare systems. So those were the two main challenges which we see for organisations who are looking to adopt a digital solution. And I think in terms of digital solution, I think to reiterate the point, it's just digital is a means to an end for the commercialisation of a device. If someone, for instance, so I mentioned digital twins earlier, if someone says, I want to build a digital twin, that's the worst place to start. You're addressing an unmet need, and a digital twin will service that. Likewise, people a decade ago would say, well, I want a digital strategy. Well, why do you want a digital strategy? You want to really develop a product or something which is going to provide benefit to the market. So on the concept of evidence generation interoperability, what we're doing alongside CDP as an organisation is establishing a digital innovation lab in the Liverpool City region to start looking at cardiology and stroke patient pathways, with the idea that we can create a digital twin which will mirror those pathways, so device companies can engage with the consortium, which allow to reduce the barriers to entry and reduce the risks to get something to market. So without sitting on the fence for your question, it's multiple different challenges to get something to market. AI and digital is just one part of it. But one advice I probably would give from a CPI perspective is that the real successful innovators are the ones who can speak to the right people and surround themselves with people who complement their weaknesses. So if you're really good at design and not so strong at health economics, then surround yourself with people who are really good at health economics. Likewise for regulatory, etc. So I suppose that's the main thing. If you're not particularly strong at AI and you think that AI might provide a solution, partner with an organisation who loves getting involved in the detail of AI.
Yeah. No, that's great. Kind of a question really for the three of you then. Where would you see the big success stories? Which AI applications have so far been really successful in the healthcare sector?
I can give an example, sorry, not necessarily with the healthcare sector, but we've, for the last 12 months, we've been talking to quite a few companies where they're hoping to do in silico clinical trials. We know that's being used in biocompatibility to work out size of tox, etc., before you go into the in vivo, in vitro studies. I think they're even working on in silico good practice methods, etc. So I think that could become a really good way of simulating some of that product use before you actually hit clinical trial stage. So although not a success story yet, but it's being worked on.
Yeah, so I think this plays to sort of two phases, really. One is the sort of machine learning level of AI. I mean, when we say AI these days, we always talk about generative AI, but actually the old school machine learning is really valuable too. So the ability to interpret an image, to be able to do some diagnosis, so basically to characterize a feature in an image to support a diagnostic decision, that's pretty well established now. Our biggest issue there actually is the doctors and the clinicians trusting the AI, and there's some really interesting research to show that radiologists reject the AI, even though the AI is probably right. So there's a balance there. So there's a human-like interaction. But I think the area that I think is for me really interesting is mental health. Because I think with the large language models, what we've got is a human interface which feels very human to human, and that should absolutely not be replacing the doctor in that conversation. But it very much is an opportunity to interact in a way that actually we possibly will open up with a machine more than we will open up with another human being, and we'll actually get a lot of the similar levels of interaction. So I think the whole area of mental health, stroke, mindfulness, and so on, and there's a continuum there from the consumer level all the way through to the properly medical environment. I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, great.
I think, in short, the areas where we've seen success are ones where they make money or provide clinical output. Sorry to be straight, but that's kind of how things work in healthcare, and there's nothing wrong with that. So we've seen, as Tim mentioned, around image analysis and those sorts of things. I think I mentioned it before, something around personalised healthcare or individualised healthcare. The more and more data that we're generating on ourselves, it's becoming so huge data sets. It's very difficult for humans to interpret those data sets. So I think if the drive is to provide better patient outcomes and individualised outcomes, then the kind of one-size-fits-all to medtech or one-size-fits-all to pharmaceuticals, hopefully business models will move away from that in the future. And I think data and AI is crucial to be able to realise on that.
Yeah, excellent. And you got any points on that, Tautvydas?
Sorry, no.
Okay, no, that's a problem. I mean, I think we've got one customer who produces an app for detecting melanoma, and I had melanoma in 2018 and got 8 centimetres by 10 millimetres deep chopped out of my shoulder. That would have been something I'd have liked to have seen that app a few years ago, but that seems to be an area that's been very successful. Are there any areas we think that at the moment there are challenges we're not overcoming yet? Do we find problematic areas in AI? And just as you said, Tim, that a lot of clinicians think, well, do I trust that? And I'd rather go back to my old traditional ways of analysing and assessing things.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this comment I made about CDP ourselves, is actually what is our expectation on productivity change over the next few years? And I think, is it 5%, 20%, 95%? Are we expecting doctors and nurses to suddenly have a productivity change of 95%? So we completely automate some of the admin that they have to do so they can actually look at and then converse with the patient in front of them rather than have to face down and look at a computer all the time. So that absolutely will happen. So I think the real challenge will just be the pace of change management. And as human beings, how do we change? And if we are suddenly 95% more productive, what do I now do with
Yeah.
that time?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's quite a struggle, actually.
Yeah.
So in the healthcare sector, if you've got someone more time, great, because I'm sure there's loads and loads of stuff to do, because there really is. There's always going to be more demand than we can do it. So what are we going to actually do? How are we going to change? I think that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, good.
Yeah, I think just to add on that in terms of what we do more time, I think if digitisation or AI can bring more efficiencies, I think it's important to fill that time with empathetic care where applicable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be broken if we speed up, if we enhance it, we create more efficiencies and then just use those efficiencies to do the same things.
Yeah.
Of course, that allows us to service more people, but it feels to me that the digital side of things will bring empathy for people. I think just to add on that as well, two areas where we're seeing interest in research is around federated learning and explainable AI. So federated learning in the context of security across hospital data sets, I think that's important. And then explainable AI, trying to remove that kind of black box notion of AI where if a clinician's making a decision, they can make a decision based on what the AI is kind of justifying how it came up with that decision, which hopefully will make things a bit easier and allow people to make better decisions and have more confidence in those decisions that they make.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I can remember working for an ECG company for many years, and you used to have scanning centres. And in these days, this has gone back quite a bit, it was when you used audio cassettes for recording ECG, and the scanning centre would sit there and basically scan through the ECG. Now, at that time, this was the early 90s, the technology then used machine learning, and you could teach the system what an ideal normal was, and then it could identify aberrants and so on. But you think if you had that technology that you have nowadays, back then, what a difference that would have made. And you wouldn't have needed these scanning centres that just sat and downloaded ECG all day. So that would have made a huge difference. Have we seen any, coming to the negative side of things, have we seen any horror stories where we think it hasn't really worked when we're talking about artificial intelligence? Things that maybe still require a bit of polishing, so to speak.
So are we talking about generative AI still?
Or just, just...
So I think the biggest worry for me is that it's very easy to put roadblocks in the way and use them as an excuse. So hallucination. Okay. So you drive a car, you might get a flat tire. It doesn't mean you don't drive cars.
Yeah.
And hallucinations are just literally being thrown out in the way of us moving forward with generative AI. And I think there's a lot of noise and needless fear about it.
Yeah.
There should be absolute concern, there should be regulation, and there should be proper focus. And I love what the UK has recently done, is actually invested quite significantly in some academic institutions, about £100 million, to do academic research, which should be independent, to be able to understand how. And for me, that's really important, I think.
Yeah. No, excellent. And obviously, one of the topics we were just chatting outside before we came in about gathering data sets and bias. Do we see problems at the moment still with bias in data sets that are being used to train models, or do we think people are getting around that and are starting to come to grips with that as well?
I think we recognise it now more than we did. So diversity is really important, and actually we are now able to generate data sets. So the UK Biobank, for example, is an amazing resource, but it's full of people like me.
Okay.
Actually, it's not very diverse, and they've had to work really hard to find that diversity of individual.
Yeah.
So actually, I think we need to work really hard to make sure we build the data sets that we need. We also need to work really hard to potentially synthesize additional data in order to give us the proper spread.
Yeah.
But at least we recognise it now.
Yeah.
I think what's not recognised is that these large language models are mostly English, and because there's so much English on the internet, and actually, so moving it to different areas, while it can translate really, really well, there is still a deficit, I think, in other languages.
Yeah.
I think, just to add, it's really important in terms of to make sure that when we're developing these synthetic data sets, that we also recognise the developing world, and the data sets aren't based on the westernised world, and they're not based on people who are more affluent, for instance, and we make sure that the data sets cover not just the emerging, not just the developed markets, but the emerging markets as well.
Sure.
That's really important.
Sure. No, and that's also an interesting point. Obviously, education. We've met quite a few kind of very talented young students yesterday and today. Do we think the education system is keeping up with the pace that's required for people to be trained and skilled, particularly on the technical side in terms of algorithm development? Do we feel that our kind of universities are keeping pace with this?
I think it's not keeping pace with us, it's keeping pace with our own children, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
So having two boys, they're now at university, they're all over this, they use it a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
So I think the education is not keeping pace with their students.
Okay.
I think I'd echo that, because as we hire people, as they come in for interviews, some of them would actually leverage the knowledge of the AI and what they can do and how they can increase their productivity, which is quite good to see as well. Trying to use that as a tool to try and increase their own ability to do stuff. So,
Excellent.
I think, some of the candidates who we engage with, they're extremely intelligent, more intelligent than me, that's for sure, on that topic. I think if we take the lens of healthcare, I think that's quite important. So we know there's a lot of talent development in AI and data analysis and engineering, etc. Does that talent want to work in our sector? I think that's another question. Are we providing the educational resources for people to become knowledgeable in data science and engineering, but with a healthcare focus? If you look on LinkedIn, the salaries that in the US, for instance, that they're offering around data science and engineering, other sectors are absolutely massive compared to the UK. So I think there's an abundance of talent in data science and engineering. The question is the healthcare sector an attractive proposition?
Yeah.
I think the generations coming through want to work on purposeful things, and the healthcare sector obviously brings that purpose. So
No, good. It's interesting as well, kind of the point around bias. Not necessarily from an AI perspective, but we've worked on a number of projects where the FDA, for instance, they introduced this outside the United States in 2019, and they can basically make the decision if they see a bias in terms of clinical studies, but that's likely to move into the world of artificial intelligence as well. Do we think, with experts like yourselves who work at the coalface every day, do you think that people are doing enough to be able to get a broad set of data that's going to basically transcend different markets, or do we still think there may be some challenges around bias of data sets?
I think bias comes from access, I think. And that's one of the conversations we've had here, and actually one of the conversations we had when we were doing your report, was exactly that, is getting access to data. And the NHS institutions are struggling. They're not comfortable sharing data because they sort of want to, but they're sort of not quite sure how, whether they should, and whether they should ask people to pay for it. And they certainly don't have the team and the staff and the time to prepare the data that then the commercial organisations can make use of. So I think ultimately it's down to the health service organisations to provide access to the data. And that's, I think, where we're really lucky in the UK, that we have people who care. So one of the things I love about this particular conference, it shows me quite how much people within the NHS are pushing hard to fix that problem and to get it right. And it's almost in spite of the electronic health record systems out there. They've sort of got in the way. But the services are working really hard to get that data. The investment in the UK Biobank, all of that, I think, is huge. And I think that initiative is what helps drive away bias. But it's still going to be good for the UK and not necessarily good for others. But at least we can only do well in the UK what we can do.
No, so I mean that potentially then you might be talking about an AI solution that's ideal for the UK market, but then if you're looking to sell it in other markets, then there may still be a bias challenge to come around.
I think that's true, but I also think that one of the things that has changed in the last 2 or 3 years, last 12 months, since ChatGPT came out, is that I was working in AI a number of years ago, started my PhD, was actually included some AI a long time ago now. And I think all of those people who were 2 years ago experts in AI, claiming these outrageous salaries everywhere, suddenly these large language models came out, and everyone starts from scratch. Everyone has now gone back to stage 0,
Yeah.
and we're all in the same place.
Yeah.
And it's the phrase democratizing AI, but it is a phrase, and it's sort of apt here.
Yeah.
Is that we can all now work with the best AI in the world is at my fingertips. It's on an app. It's ChatGPT. I can do this with it.
Yeah.
And it's actually it's not as though you don't need data scientists, but we can all now explore and experiment.
Yeah.
And you do need data scientists to do real projects and real products, but we can all get to play with it and use it and utilize it in our daily lives. And I think that is really extraordinary.
Yeah, excellent. And that was interesting, your comment as well about funding. So usually people complain about the lack of funding, but it sounds like you feel quite comfortable with the amount of funding that's going into it at the moment.
In AI, yes, plenty of funding going in. There's no doubt about it. And you just put AI in front of your name as a startup, and you'll probably attract a bit more valuation. A slight cynic, but that's so. I founded a company a few years ago. We were helping blind people get around the built environment. We were using AI, but not generative AI to do it. We should have really had AI in our name. It would have helped. I've no doubt about it. But yes, I think that is true. But I think for me, it's digital health. So how do we innovate in digital health? I think that's really key. We need to be able to do it as there's modest amounts of funding coming through. The UK is really good, as we found in the work, in the really early stage, where Angel's able to support. But in that next stage, that step up from we've proved a concept, we really now need to test it and validate it before we can get it into proper clinical trial. That's the bit we miss.
Sure.
And so we do need more funding in that space.
Okay. No, that's good to know. Good point. And I think the kind of other thing that kind of springs to mind as well is the regulatory side of things. So it was encouraging to see Amy working with BSI to come up with a risk management standard for artificial intelligence. I think we've still got a bit to go, but we do have some good international involvement in starting to look at the risk management of artificial intelligence. And that's not such an easy subject as talking about your over voltage on your power supply or something like that. Yeah.
Well, I think it'll be a challenge for the test teams, won't it?
It will be, and we obviously need to kind of keep up with that. Again, in the type of business we are in, we do a lot of physical product testing where we produce data. I think that data ultimately will be used in AI models in the future, but we're obviously keeping an eye on to make sure that, if there's a product that we need to be aware of, we know about it.
Excellent. Well, that brings us to 5.2. It might be worthwhile just asking if any of the audience have got questions that they'd like to fire in the direction of our panel of experts here.
Hi, so this is to Tim and Steve. I was just wondering, so you talked about the potential for the use of generative AI to automate tasks of doctors and nurses. Have you worked with any companies that are currently doing that or exploring doing that, and what are your opinions on sort of timelines for that and when that's going to come to market?
I'm not sure I can quote on timelines because it's so hard to predict that. But yes, we are working with organisations that are using generative AI to basically interpret things in a clinical environment, typically where regulation and policy is really important. So applying policy to a particular decision-making process is something that generative AI can work really well. You can effectively embed the policy using a thing called embeddings, which is a way of basically mathematical interpretation of the policy into the model. You can then use that to basically saying what you're now doing conforms or doesn't conform to that policy. So I think that becomes really powerful, and I think that will be an avenue that people will be exploring pretty fast.
Yes.
Over here.
Okay, sorry. So we're aware of companies who are developing software as a medical device for things like triage and patient flow and discharge. One of the challenges we see for innovators for that is getting access to the right clinicians, getting access to the right people within the hospital. Just for instance, I know there's a session on the integrated care boards or ICSs in the other session, but getting access to the right people to allow you to trial and develop and prove your innovation is particularly difficult. But I think, as you said, the UK's got quite a good landscape for initial funding. It's the transfer to VC funding where it's difficult. So, but there is support out there to do that type of thing.
Oh, I was picking up on, I think you were saying, health is a service and not a device. And if we continually treat it as a device, we're going to lose out on a lot of potential innovation. So how are you seeing, I guess, the work that you do deal with that shift? Is it about using AI so that you can comply better and comply faster? Or is it about deregulating and, you know, like in New Zealand, you just don't have the MHRA and it's a bit more of a wild, wild west of getting things done. Like, how can we move forward given the risks and patient safety and everything that you do want to evidence when you're talking about healthcare?
If I'm honest, I hadn't really thought about it. It was just I'm putting a challenge out there, but I think it's really important to go beyond the device, and I think that's where health service is a service. So for me, I throw it out there as a challenge. I would love to find an answer. I'm not quite sure what it is yet.
In terms of, so if you look on the large medical device companies' websites, there's, I actually did this, so I can't say which of the companies are, but I did it for an internal presentation. So if you look at large medical device companies, if you look at NHS CEOs, for instance, there's loads of quotes from them saying how the industry's changing from a traditional hardware-based offer to more of a software or software as a service type business model. So those companies are realizing that their traditional product, where they would sell a product or a hardware, now they're able to sell data insights, and they understand how powerful that data is to provide more personalized and better quality care. So that you're seeing a lot of those big companies realize that it's no longer just a hardware offer, it's as a service, or it's selling data insights and how they can leverage those data insights to provide better patient outcomes, which ultimately brings them more revenue and sustainable business models.
I want to ask, do you see application of AI happening in the field of like rare diseases? Number one, given that, you know, data size is much smaller, and number two, there's less of a business incentive to, well, there's more incentive to hit like critical mass, but less for like kind of smaller populations. Yeah.
I think in general we're seeing a shift from one-size-fits-all principles to more individualized healthcare. And I think data is a key glue, if that's the correct word, or it's a key undercurrent to enable that to happen. So if you think of getting patients' genomic data, getting patients' environmental data from Fitbits and wearables, those sorts of things, suddenly you're being able to get a massive digital picture of someone's potential health. And if you can get a bigger picture of their health from a digital perspective, then that provides more opportunity to provide personalised and better patient outcomes. And then that'll drive new business models in that sense. So the kind of one-size-fits-all principle, it seems to be shifting away and moving more towards individualised healthcare.
And yeah, and I'd also add to that, I think the way the world is connecting with data, rare disease may be actually in the UK it's very rare, 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a million or something, but we've got the world. We can start to bring data from across the world. And I think Steve, you touched on it earlier around digital twins. I tend to use the phrase digital persona. So you may be able to create a persona around a particular disease type or particular type of character, and you'll be able to sort of bring that data into that persona so that it becomes much easier to recognize that this is a rare disease, because we're analyzing much more of our data, and we'll be able to match really well to that persona. And I think we will be able to flag rare disease risks to a clinician, for example. A GP who has to be by nature general will be able to say, oh, actually, you know what, there may be something of interest to explore here. So I think it will be absolutely valuable for rare disease.
Any other questions then? Gentlemen, two gentlemen there.
Something like that. Which was looking at symptom checker diagnostic aid, and did essentially a trial of that versus GPs. For rare disease, the app was better. For common diseases, GP was better, and the best was a GP using the app. So I think that hopefully gives us a positive picture of we're not going to be taken over, but actually if we use technology in a sensible way, it improves patient outcomes, it improves our efficiency, it's better all around.
Was that published?
Not by us.
I'll have to ask you later.
Okay, so the devices which are coming in the upcoming days, are these independent? And if they make a mistake, then who are taking the responsibility? Suppose in case of a clinician, if he make a mistake or any negligence happens, then he is going to be responsible. But in case of a device, so who are going to take the responsibility? Or is this assigned to a particular physician, or is it working independently?
There's a horrible phrase that's going around at the moment, which is human in the loop. And I dislike it massively because the human's responsible. They're not in the loop. They are the person in control and in charge. And I think we need to use these tools as advisory, guidance, risk measure tools for the clinician and the physician to take authority, take control. It's their responsibility. I think it's really, really important. I'm a big, I think the human in the loop thing, whether it be military or whether it be medical, we need the human in control, please.
I think that's where we're seeing the growth of explainable AI as well. So algorithms which keep the human in the loop, to use your phrase.
Yes, yeah, hi. Thank you for the very interactive and very engaging session. My question is more on the healthcare economics, because in the Western countries, the healthcare is more a state sort of a service. But whereas if you see the rest of the world, especially around the Asian regions, healthcare is more private. But again, when we talk about economics, yes, there are value benefits or the economic burden gets reduced in one part of the world. But whereas on the other side of the world, it's more a commercial aspect, which is sometimes not a good word to say. But so in terms of adoption of AI, in your experiences, because you all are international companies, work with different organizations, so that adoption, how easy is it, or how do we overcome those challenges, especially when there are really some very good innovative products? So how do we encourage that adoption in the Southeast Asian countries or the other side of the world? So just wanted to get some views from your side, please. Thank you.
So a few years ago, I worked in Africa helping put a mobile payments system in place. So we put a system where you could send $5, $10 on just a text message. So we did this in Kenya, and within 3 or 4 years, we were sending 40% of GDP was going in $5, $10 text messages around the country. Now, I think it's exactly the same for AI, for across the world, where, as you say, it's both people have less money, and it is a completely different environment where it is privately funded. And I think the AI and mobile technologies working together, particularly the amazing sensors you have on a mobile phone, will absolutely make it available. And I think it will shock us, actually. So in the same way that I went to Africa to effectively do stuff that I couldn't do in Europe, and that effectively then brought back fintech into London, which is why the same will happen again. Whether it'll be India, whether it'll be Africa, it will absolutely be happening. And I think that's going to be really exciting.
Thanks. I've had an extra 30 seconds to think of an answer, so thanks, Tim. I think, of course, there's differences with different healthcare systems across the world, but the fundamentals of health economics, I don't think particularly shifts the intervention that you're bringing through. How does that benefit what's existing out there in terms of a pathway, for instance, or how does that benefit what are the benefits of this intervention? Do they outweigh the opportunity cost of another intervention which is potentially available? So I think, of course, there's differences across the different jurisdictions, but it's really important that any intervention makes sense from a health economics and a clinical perspective.
Great. Well, I think we're running out of time now, and people will be needing some lunch. But just if we have a round of applause for our panel here. And I think, as far as we know, all of us will be around this afternoon. So if there's any other questions, and people can flag somebody down or come past our stand or whatever. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic panel, right? I really enjoyed that. Okay, guys, so 2:30 we come back. Next hour and a half, go and network, go and see our startups, go and speak to them, go and test out some of the equipment. They all feel a bit lonely upstairs at the moment, so go and see them. And lots on AI in the afternoon, 2:30.